Hey, and welcome to this week's coaching video for those of you who teach on Sunday mornings at Dayspring. If you're going to be teaching an adult class on Sunday morning, January the 11th, this video is designed to help familiarize you with this week's lesson and maybe to give you some coaching tips along the way. So, grab your teaching transcript. You should have a copy of that via email now, and I'm going to look at it with you. Maybe you can jot some notes on your transcript along the way, and maybe that'll get you ready for Sunday. So let's look at it together starting on page 1. Page 1 is your overview, which acquaints you with this week's lesson. Now, this Sunday, let me remind you, this Sunday we're starting a new emphasis church-wide called Life on Mission. And this lesson is going to kick it off for you and your group, and it's going to dovetail with what we're going to be hearing Sunday morning. We've got a special guest preacher going to be here from the North American Mission Board. And this lesson should supplement what we hear from him. In addition to that, I want to remind you that we're going to start reading a book together as a church next week. It's called Life on Mission, and it's actually co-authored by the guy who's going to be here Sunday. But every week we're going to have a couple of chapters to read as a church. They're not very long, so it shouldn't be a problem for everybody to read along. But what I would encourage you to do is to maybe read ahead a little bit in your book. Certainly not now because you won't get your copy till Sunday. But jot this down on your notes, on your transcript, that on page 163 in this book, there are some group leader discussion ideas and those sort of things. I would encourage you to look at some of those from week to week as you're preparing your lesson to see if any of it folds in with the transcripts that you're getting. And it may be some things that you can use and utilize along the way. So that's just another thing that you may find to be valuable as you prepare these Life on Mission lessons. And again, that's at the end of the book that you're going to be picking up Sunday, all right? Now, let's talk about this lesson specifically, the one that you're going to be teaching through. This lesson is going to talk about us living on mission and about the reality that the mission of the church involves every man, woman, and child having access to the gospel. This lesson is going to touch on a subject that for a lot of churches you don't hear about at all anymore. It's a subject that some avoid and have eliminated altogether, and it's the subject matter of hell. Now, we don't avoid the subject here because it's a reality. The Bible speaks of hell in very real terms, and this lesson is going to talk about hell as it connects to the mission that we are on. The reality is that the reality of hell serves as a pretty strong motivator in terms of our advancement of the mission. There is a role that it plays in helping us do the work that we're called to do. This lesson is going to touch on that, and then it's going to move into some practical things in terms of how we advance the mission of the church. All right, so it'll talk about our motivation or the motivation that's provided when we think about the reality of hell, and then it'll talk about a couple of practical things as to how the mission advances. So that's really what you're looking at in this lesson, okay? And by the way, the how that you're going to be getting to in your lesson will have to do with the multiplication of churches, all right? Not just explosive growth within a congregation, but explosive multiplication of the number of churches that there are. So that's what this lesson's all about. That's the big picture. Let's look at the details together where you're going to start teaching on page 2. Page 2 and 3 is an opening introduction. And instead of looking at that right now, just let me kind of explain what it's trying to do for you, okay? Here's what this introduction is trying to do. I want you to imagine, and try and get your group to imagine, what if our church in 2015, what if Dayspring in 2015 experienced explosive growth? And when I say explosive growth, I mean, what if we quadrupled? What if everybody here was responsible for leading 3 people to Christ, and all of a sudden they became a part of our church, and all of a sudden instead of saying 1,200 people or whatever, we're looking at 4,000 or 5,000 people. Just kind of do a what-if dream session there. I mean, what would we have to do to make that happen? Once you start kind of what-ifing and pretending, and I'm talking about our church as is right now, 2015, the facilities we have, the staff we have, the resources we have, all of that. What would it look like if we all of a sudden tried to accommodate about 4 or 5 times as many people as we do now? I mean, that would be a pretty wild ride that we'd be on, right? And certainly we would do everything that we can to make that happen should that situation present itself. But once you start playing through the logistics of it, you find yourself thinking, honestly, could we? I mean, could we accommodate that? Could we make space for everybody if that happened? Now, Here's where this introduction is going. Let's just say that we pulled it off. What if every congregation in our city did that? Now, here's the reality. If every congregation in our city went through the hard work, which you and I are acknowledging may not even be physically possible to figure out how to do that, but if we all did it, you know what? There'd still be a lot of men, women, and children who would not be in church because the present situation, the present structure, the present facilities, all those things, when you take every congregation in Mobile, it still wouldn't accommodate all of the people in our city. So the whole point of this opening illustration is to help people understand this, that it's not explosive growth of the congregations that already exist. That's not the answer to reaching every man, woman, and child. Now, that certainly would help, but it's not the answer. The answer is an explosion in the number of congregations that exist. And you see this on page 3 in your transcript, right about the middle of the page there on page 3. It says there is a solution. Actually, there is a solution, and it is simple. What is needed isn't so much explosive growth in the existing congregations, it's explosive growth in the number of congregations. Bottom line is that if every man, woman, and child is going to be a reality, there's going to have to be a multiplication of churches, not just addition. Okay, that's the explosive growth. Not just addition. There's going to have to be multiplication and addition. All right, so church planting is a very real need. Even right here in Mobile, where you might think we have plenty of churches, that's not true. If every one of them quadrupled in size, we still wouldn't have reached everybody. So there's a work to be done. There's a mission to be done. And we're going to look at a passage here that's going to maybe help to motivate us and reiterate what we talked about in this illustration. So look at page 4. This is where you start teaching the text. You're going to be teaching from Matthew chapter 25. This is a pretty intense part of Jesus' ministry because the cross is becoming very near. Jesus is saying some things about the end of time, and there's a lot of focus to his words here. You're going to read this passage with your group, and there are 3 basic points that you're going to teach through. Okay, let's look at them together, all 3. Number 1, on page 4, here's the first point you're going to teach, is that we should be worried about reaching other people because hell is a very real place. Now, here's the bottom line. Jesus speaks of hell in very real terms here. That should be a very big motivator to us to get to work, doing the work of the mission. All right? Now, you're going to teach a concept here, and whether you use this term or not is up to you, but it's in your lesson. You're going to talk about being functional universalists, okay? Functional universalists. Now, a universalist is someone who says that there's a good, happy afterlife for everybody. There's a million different roads. We'll all get there however we're going to get there. That's what a universalist is. There's no such thing in hell. Everybody goes to heaven, etc., etc. Now, a functional universalist would be this. It would be those of us who say that there is a hell, but functionally we act as if that's not true. All right? You're going to press that point in this first point, that the reality of hell should be a very real motivator to us. And as you teach through this, it's going to be a sobering point and maybe a very serious point as you teach through it. Not really a time to crack jokes and all that kind of stuff. But here's what you're going to do. As you get to the end of page 4 here, there's an attention grabber. There's something that you say that should serve as an attention grabber. So if you need to make the statement even a little more dramatic than it's in print here, so be it. But the attention grabber is this. Look at the bottom of page 4. It says that what many of us do is we start believing that hell is not a real place. And if you want to say it with a little more punch, you might even say it like this. You know, a lot of us in this group, we don't even believe that hell's a real place. Now, that's intended to be an attention grabber because it's intended to help you explain this whole concept of a functional universalist. Flip on over to page 5 on your transcript, and you'll see how that all is explained there. At that point, you're explaining to people that, look, either if there's no motivation and no intensity in reaching people with the gospel, it may mean that either I just don't believe there is a hell, or it might mean that I'm just not all that motivated to do anything about it. Again, this is a very serious point you're making here. The reality of hell should motivate us. And the whole point here, look in the middle of the page. It says right there in the middle of the page, it says, we need to remember that just as heaven is real, so is hell. Both are real and both are eternal. And again, this is Jesus talking about them in very real terms. There's some explanation there. Look at the question you ask in the bottom of that page. It says, if you saw someone unwittingly walking into a pit of fire that would kill them, would you stand by and watch, or would you be motivated to help them avoid it? To what extreme would you go to prevent them from walking into a fire? And obviously you see where we're going with this. You know, if I saw someone about to die, I mean, I would go to great lengths to make sure that didn't happen. Even if I got physically injured in the way of trying to save their life, I would do it. I wouldn't just watch them walk into a pit and go, oh boy, that was tragic. I would go to great lengths to stop that. The bottom line is, if we're saying that hell is real, surely we would do a lot to keep people from going there, right? So your whole first point that you've taught here is about the reality of not just heaven, but also hell, and how that can really serve as a big motivator for us to get involved in the work of the mission. So if we are indeed willing to do whatever it takes to make sure that people aren't going to hell, then what exactly is that going to involve? Two things here. Your second and third point. Look on page 6 of your transcript. Here's the second point. It says, we expand the kingdom by reaching out to others. Now, that sounds so simplistic and so much of a no-brainer. Okay, so we don't want people to go to hell, so what do we need to do? We need to reach out to them. But it's actually making a pretty profound point here. And the point is this, is that we have to reach out to them in the sense that we take the initiative to go to them. And see, here's the problem with the modern day church and much of our approach. We think that lost people should come to us. They should come to us, and when they come to us, then they can hear the gospel and get saved and all of that. The responsibility rests on us. We are the ones who have to go and find the lost sheep. It's our responsibility to go. That's what this whole point is making. And you're going to read there in 1 Corinthians chapter 9 where the Apostle Paul says, look, I'll become a different guy altogether, practically, in order to reach some. He was highly motivated to go to where people were, to be what people needed him to be in order to reach them with the gospel. The whole point here is that you and I, as the church, assuming that we are motivated for people not to go to hell, we have to take the light into the darkness. We have to take the light where the darkness is. You know, back in December, when we were studying the Christmas lessons, there was a sermon where we looked at the incarnation of God, where God becoming man. And I made the statement that the incarnation is, it's not just a comfort to us, but it's also a challenge, because we're called to be like Christ. And what Christ did was the one who is light, went to the darkness. Remember that? The Word became flesh and blood and moved into the neighborhood. This is our challenge. We are to go where the darkness is. All right? That's what we say. So when we say we expand the kingdom by reaching out to others, that's what we're talking about. If you want to reword the second point to help make that point a little clearer, go ahead and do it. But we've got to take the light to the darkness is the whole point here. There's a question in the middle of the page. It says, do you know of any examples of how this is happening in our church or city? I hope you do know some examples of how Christians aren't waiting for those in darkness to come to us, but rather instead we're going to them. And here's a great example. Right here within our own church family, there's a lady in our church family named Kathy who has started to gather together a cluster of other ladies within the church, and they are periodically, now check this out, they are periodically going to the strip clubs here in Mobile for the purpose of taking like cupcakes and treats to the ladies who work there, to be their friend. Now, that's an example of us saying, okay, look, we don't want people to die without Christ, because we know that there's a godless eternity that awaits those who never receive him. And being motivated by that, Kathy and these other ladies are saying, I don't think they're going to come to us, so you know what? We'll go to them. That's a great example that maybe you can share. Maybe you have your own examples, but that's just one example, all right? So since hell is real, and that motivates us, we have to reach out to people. We have to go to where they are. There's a third point that you make. It's on page 7. Check out page 7. It says we also have to reach out to people who aren't like us. And we see this in the passage. You go back to the Matthew passage, and you see that Jesus points out people who his crowd would probably refer to as them or those people. And here's the whole point. Every man, woman, and child means exactly that. And there are people who aren't like you and who aren't like me. And the reality is there are people who probably will never come to our church because they don't identify with you and with me. And that's why the responsibility of multiplying churches is so imperative. There's going to have to be a great diversity of church expressions within Mobile. There are going to have to be a great number of churches where people who don't identify with this church or that church or this church or that church can find one that they do identify with where they can feel at home. And Jesus makes this very clear. So here's what you've taught in this lesson. You started with an introduction, really pointing out that explosive growth really isn't going to lead us to every man, woman, and child being reached. An explosion of the number of churches or number of congregations. That's the key. And then we look at this lesson where we're reminded of something that ought to motivate us. Hell is a very real place. We're going to have to go to people where they already are instead of expecting them to come to us. And when we do go into those places and plant churches, we need to plant churches that are contextually appropriate. And this applies in our own city and our state and all around the world. The bottom line is we as a people, as a congregation, we really need to get serious about being a sending church, a multiplying church. And that's what this lesson is all about. All right. On the lesson finishes up there on page 8. As you get into page 9, that's when you split your groups into clusters and you do your application moment. Your handout is on page 11. So you put them into clusters, you give them the handout, and the handout lets them work through some things that are going to reiterate everything that you've been teaching and what they heard in the Sunday sermon, as well as what they're going to read in their book this week. So it's all going to dovetail together. Once you've taught it, once they've done their clusters, once everything is done, then you'll wrap it up with a conclusion. You see that there on the very last page. And it's a simple wrap up, and it leads you toward a memory verse. All right? So this kicks us off, man. Life on mission. Life on mission. And what we're really hoping to be are individuals on mission with God who understand the call to give every man, woman, and child access to the gospel. To be individuals who are on mission, but also a bunch of individuals who come together as a church who are on mission. And I hope that really starting this week, that many of us get infected with this. Infected with the call and the cause of making sure that the church does whatever it has to do to give every man, woman, and child access to the gospel. All right? Hey, thanks for listening in, and thanks for teaching your group Sunday. We're going to have a great Sunday. Look forward to seeing you there. Be sure to invite everybody who's a part of your group so that we can get off on a strong start, and remind them that we're going to be picking up our copies of Life on Mission this Sunday. Get yours in the lobby. You can get one for you, and one per household will probably be fine. But be sure to pick that up this Sunday as we dive in, all right? God bless you. We'll see you then.